Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you news from around the world, we talk about innovation, and we continue our discussion of what we're doing to deal with an ever-changing and complex world. Whether it's dealing with the health of our communities, fighting a pandemic, getting our economy back on track. Today, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about smart cities because Friday is the Connected Community Conference. But I did have some breaking news to share with you all in North Carolina that I think we should talk about today. And it's the concept we've talked about before: election maps, gerrymandering, and the fight for political control in the legislatures and the Congress of the United States. Yesterday in North Carolina at noon, many candidates were actually on their way to file for state offices in North Carolina, congressional office, the United States Senate, and also some local offices like the town of Cary and other cities that moved their elections to March. The Court of Appeals, 5 minutes before the filing began, went on and actually delayed the elections, saying that they needed to relook at the maps, and they didn't say when the election was going to be held again for the March partisan primaries on March 8th. Then that evening, later in the evening, they lifted the stay and said the elections start on Tuesday. But there's been rumors that these maps, the congressional maps in North Carolina, which were drawn by Republicans, could be struck down on constitutional grounds, which would throw all the elections out of whack. The point is, it just seems to be ridiculous that the government cannot provide a more consistent and transparent way of determining maps, elections. And the power play for power has totally made these individuals completely not seeing the fact that they are literally drawing lines on maps to win the game. And it's not just a Republican thing. Democrats have been known to do that in the past as well. So today we might just discuss this a little bit. But I wanted to just go a little bit farther today in my monologue. I'm going over my time to talk about smart cities. I just want to define a smart city today, as I did on a podcast yesterday. Really, a smart city is a city that leverages data and technology to enhance the operational efficiencies of the town, to enhance the quality of life of citizens, and to provide for a more sustainable, inclusive environment and community. Now, I know that's not the definition most people are used to, but a lot of times we think of smart cities as all this whiz-bang technology. I'll just give you a couple practical examples about our own journey in Morrisville. We actually adopted a smart city plan. We actually created a smart city council, and we brought in a consultant to look at our town and look at the strategic goals of our town: economic development, livable neighborhoods, inclusive neighborhoods, public safety. And we ended up and mobility. We ended up coming up with a smart city strategy after this consultant looked at our plan. Now, what are some practical examples before we begin the show today? Well, I'll just give you 4 practical examples. Number 1, we now have an on-demand transit service in our town of Morrisville. This is powered by an app called Via, where you literally can go to 15 nodes in the town. My 16-year-old son Ryan is using it as he's getting his learner's permit to go anywhere he wants, taking traffic off the road, helping seniors get to where they need to go. It's wonderful. The second is a solar array fire panel on our fire station that is there using the solar energy to power our first responders. But the beautiful thing is that you can actually have the data and analytics there to actually track energy efficiency. On Wednesday afternoon, we're getting a finalist award for the Clean Tech Corridor Initiative in Morrisville by the Clean Tech Corridor cluster of RTP. And in this project, we actually optimize sensors to manage facility usage, to optimize how our facilities are being used, to manage floods when floods hit our parks, whether people would be notified. And we're looking at putting sensors on our roads in this corridor to track traffic and mobility. My point is this: anybody can begin a smart city journey. It really identifying a problem, looking at your operational efficiencies of town, and how you leverage data and technology to help. I'm proud to say that Morrisville is a small city, a small town, but we're moving at lightning speed compared to many neighboring communities because of identifying the problem and moving quickly. You don't have to be a Chicago, an Atlanta, a Raleigh, a Cary, a Charlotte. And I'm sure in Canada, we have Sasha Starr on the show, and I'm sure in Australia, Shaquille Latimer can tell us of many cities in these countries that are being smart cities. Is there any such thing as a dumb city? Let's hope not. Anyway, now on to our panel. We're going to bring in Mark Lee from my co-host from the Team P.O.D TV family, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, and Sasha Starr, the host of Chess Stars and Economics Monday.
So I think there's been a slight technical problem. Mark and Sasha aren't quite on yet.
Well, guys, you guys are like my family because literally I felt awful, and then I start the monologue and I feel like much better already just seeing.
That's because the voice of reason has arrived, along with the voice of irrationality.
But real quickly, I wanted to combine both. But today, I just thought I'd do a high level of the smart city because that's a hard question. I got asked that in a podcast. But let's talk about the elections first. Really surprising. Shaquille, this is so confusing. So now everybody's like, they were going to cancel the election. Now the elections are back on. Now, what if like next week the courts come back in and intervene, strike down the maps, and then they're going to have to go back to the drawing board? So it's just a...
See, the problem, Steve, is that we have a worldwide audience and we talk about gerrymandering. Some of these people from Europe and Singapore don't know what the heck you're talking about. Okay, because the thing is, so you got to get basics. People in Australia don't know what they're talking about.
Let me explain. I apologize.
That's unfair because gerrymandering goes on all over the world, and look, in Australia it's called redistricting.
You guys cheat too over there?
We all do, and of course we're allies, so we follow your bad ideas. But let me just say, look, gerrymandering oftentimes is used in order to counteract votes in a particular area. Republicans will do that where there are some Democrats in a particular area, and if you push them into an area where there's majority Republicans, their votes don't matter anymore because it's going to go to Republicans in that district. And the Democrats do the same thing where they'll take an area where there's a handful of Republicans and they don't get a vote. And I'll really go back to what I've been saying a lot over the last few months, which is that neither political party should ever attempt or ever desire to destroy the other political party. You want there to be two strong parties in opposition to each other if you're going to have a Westminster or Westminster derivative system, because that acts as a check and balance, and you get feedback about things that you might be doing wrong when you're in power. And so when we see gerrymandering designed to eliminate the vote, that's not a good thing. However, sometimes gerrymandering is done in order to actually give certain people a vote who otherwise would have their voices silenced. So, it's a difficult road. You've got to try and find a balance. It's not always bad, but what's the alternative? How else would you draw electoral divisions or, as you call them, districts over there, or constituencies over there? How else would you propose to do it? And that's
computer-based technology. In other words, they've already have computer-based technology that
Nick,
draws the lines very equitably.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, humans get it, they screw it up. It's like landing an airplane.
But if you do it absolutely equitably, right, and you find that every district is essentially 50-50, Democrats, Republicans, that may not be the best way of actually doing it. You might find that some states have got 50% or close to 50% of their population being Democrats and 50% Republicans. You want half of the representatives to be Republicans.
What you need to really do is start educating Americans to get away from party worshiping. In other words, the thing is,
that's besides the point. But that's besides the point of gerrymandering.
The ideas. I mean,
but that's besides the point of gerrymandering. The question is, should both sides have representation based on the numbers in that area?
And let me explain to the
viewing audience
real quickly before we go into
me or him.
We want to get Mark Lee's opinion and Nick, but just for those listening, what gerrymandering is, as Shaquille Adams said, it's redistricting. So in the United States, the way our system works is every 10 years in legislatures, the parties in power will determine who draws the maps. And so in North Carolina, in 2020, the Republicans reheld control of the General Assembly, the North Carolina House and the Senate. So they drew the maps. What they did was, they did this a few years ago, and they were struck down because they were racially gerrymandered. And when they say racial gerrymandering, they're packing folks in, and they've split cities up to give them different advantages. And so the question at hand is what the process should be. Okay. Number one, it's not about a Republican thing. I want to be clear. It's the process. If the Democrats win, they would control the maps as well. And they would probably try to do it in their favor to keep control. So that's the question at hand. But what's happened, guys, is the courts are now intervening every week with stays and appeals and this and this. And how can you have a functioning democracy if you file for an office that you don't know is going to exist? Because they're going to. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, Mark. Can I just cut in just real quick? Yeah. If I can just say, and brace yourself for this one, because I'm going to defend California here, I'll give them a compliment. California's districts is actually determined theoretically by an independent group. So, and I think that there's probably something to be said for that. If you look at California, most of the landmass of California is actually Republican, but most of the population is in the high density areas, which is Democrat. But they do there's a lot of Republicans in California. So I think that you want to be able to give people fair representation in government. And I think that gerrymandering to some degree allows them to do that. Sorry, Mark, I've cut in on your time.
No, you were good. Like I said, you definitely, and Steve mentioned racial gerrymandering, and I think that partially what needs to happen is that I'm actually in favor of those kind of independent commissions, because I do agree with something that Steve said, that depending on who's in control, they will definitely gerrymander in their favor, and then you're going to go back and forth, and it becomes like a never-ending battle as to the districts shifting. We've seen that definitely here in North Carolina. I've got friends in Virginia and Georgia that have seen that as well. So there's got to be a middle ground of some sort in order for us to have a more fair system in the sense of making sure that the districts are fairly represented, and that they are not just played as party pawns, because right now what they are is party pawns, and that's something that I'm not in favor of, and definitely I get very frustrated with. And I've said on this show several times that I also get frustrated with the political action committees, because a lot of times they play into that pawnship, and they also play into this whole notion of I'm a big fan of having a informed elective, and I think that's something that Nick's talked about several times. But unfortunately, a lot of our people are, and it's not just Democrats, it's not just Republicans, but a lot of folks in general, and it's just the nature of society, are fundamentally lazy. So if you want to give them an easy out in the sense of knowing how to vote, a lot of people will go ahead and just vote according to what they think their tradition is. I think that I remember one time Shaquille mentioned that a lot of times people historically have voted according to their family politics, and they've stuck to that and not necessarily done the research necessary. So I would agree with Shaquille on that, and I would like to see a more informed system and a more informed citizenship, because definitely I do find that a lot of times people, here in Durham, I can tell you how many times people will go get a sheet from either a one of the more localized PACs, and I mentioned the People's Alliance, I mentioned the Durham Affairs, and I mentioned a couple of others, or they'll grab it from the Sierra Club, and they'll just vote according to what those people told them to vote for. And if you ask them why they voted, they really kind of get offended, and they don't really want to answer the question. But in truth, they probably just voted according to what that endorsement sheet was. So, like I said, I'm pushing for people to actually be more informed. And I'm not saying you have to know all the issues. Unless you're a politician like Steve, you're probably not going to know all the issues, but I like people to at least know those core issues and those issues that will impact them, particularly on the local political front, so they can have a solid leg to stand on when they are addressing the issues that they want to be concerned about. And I think most of us, I don't have any kids, but I think most people are concerned about things like their local taxes, their school, their water, their electricity, the things that are going to impact them directly. And those are oftentimes local things. And I think that if you're going to be voting on those local things, you need to be informed about them. So that's just my little bit of lecture, not just to the people in Durham, but to people in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick.
Oh, there is something that while you guys try and figure out elections, World War III is starting. The Ukraine and Putin. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's my closing. Don't. That's my
closing. Okay. Time out.
If we can just stick to this for a second, because I just want to say something about the process. Judge Janine P.O.D, she delivered her opening monologue on Fox a few days ago, and she said something which I agree with, which is that if you're not happy with the way the politics are going, look, she's talking to the right, but that's not the point. If you're not happy with the way politics is going and what government's doing, you need to be involved in everything, right down to the state and local government. And I say that the same thing to people that are Democrats. You need to be involved all the way through. But what I would say is a lot of people will often think, and the same thing in Australia, they'll often look at the person who's the representative for that area and say, how did that person actually become the person who's representing the party in this area? And people rarely ever go to party meetings. And so it's party delegates and party members in that area that determine that. And because most people are not going to go to the local chapter of the Democrats or the local chapter of the Republicans, or in Australia, the local Liberals, local Labor, or whatever it is, you end up handing over that influence to party delegates and party members. And the kinds of people that will go to those meetings are often activists. And I think that's why in a lot of areas you end up with people who are far more extreme than the people that they're supposed to represent.
Yeah, but time out, because not so fast, Shaquille. Okay, look, I mean, I serve on my homeowners association board now when I'm older and more.
Yeah, but you don't have homeowners association delegates.
I know, but you're saying go be active and all this other stuff. Here's the reality of America. Not Australia, but America. People here work their butts off. Sometimes, if you're going to be successful, 80 hours a week. So now they're working 80 hours a week. Now you say, go to all these government meetings. Frankly, honestly, they don't have time to go to the government meetings because they're working like dogs all the time. So they have to rely on elected officials like Steve.
I'm in meetings all day.
Yeah, I know. Steve, I appreciate the doctors, the lawyers, the architects, the engineers, the hardworking people out there don't have time to go to all your bloody meetings. Okay, that's the reality of it.
So, Nick, I appreciate what you've said. However, when people feel disaffected by what's happening in politics, what are they going to do? Mark and I believe Steve talked about PACs earlier. I'm in two minds about it. PACs aren't a particularly big thing in Australia, but I'm in two minds about that. Because on the one hand, you have very powerful lobby groups that are well funded by big corporate, throwing a lot of money behind politics, and individual people who share a common view oftentimes don't have the ability to influence government. And so, if you're not going to be involved and then you get a result that you're not happy with and you sit there and go, look, politics isn't working, why are we this dysfunctional? You have to do something. And some of that is encouraging not just yourself, but encouraging your friends, family, and colleagues to actually play a more active role in government, especially in the United States, which is supposed to be a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And if your government ministers or your local senator or local House of Reps member isn't hearing from you, they're going to represent the people that they are hearing from. And if those people are activists and not you, you may get a result that you're not expecting. or that you don't like.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean,
guys,
I agree with that, but I'm just saying the reality.
We're gonna go to the next issue, but the bottom line is that this is it's a moving target. We don't know what the seats are going to be. So, but until we come up with a better system, this is going to continue to hold American democracy, in my opinion, hostage to any political party who will leverage the system for their own political gain. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. Now let's talk real quickly about smart cities. I'm literally waiting for the NC Riot folks to confirm coming, but they may not do it until after the conference. But on Friday, there is a Connected Communities conference. But the point of my monologue today was to talk about the fact that smart cities are something that can be done with just basic applications of technology. So, and I think on World Edition, we have many cities and people that listen to the show. We should often discuss what are the problems that we can solve with technology. So one, I gave an example as the smart shuttle. This was something that we never really thought was going to be used that much, and now it's the most demanded thing in Morrisville for people to you see the shuttle driving around everywhere, right? So I think this is something
How
for
does
us.
that work, Steve? I haven't heard of Smart Shuttle. How does that work?
Well, it's in partnership with Go Triangle, which is the parent organization that runs all the transit in our county, Wake County. Go Triangle, Cary. They have this, transit service.
But
right?
what do they do?
Via. We're using an app called Via. Okay, and it's pretty simple. Download the app on your device. Mm-hmm. We have 15 nodes in Morrisville. Right now, it's only in the city. So if I wanted to go from my house, there's a node near my house, to the gym or to the park or to the senior center, I can go. When it's en route, it picks me up, takes me to my location, and then when I come back, I order it and it comes back. So the goal is to provide that ease of use. And what's happened is now people can go to the restaurant, have a drink, not worry about driving, right? Eventually, we can expand the nodes out. But I don't know, like Melbourne or in Australia.
So it's a lot like Uber then, except it's for mass transportation. Then
it is a lot like Uber. Right. So and the reason I just wanted to get your ideas, and sometimes on World Edition we just have a discussion. That's what really, in my opinion, smart cities is about. It's about optimizing technology so that you can have a sustainable community. You can have a community where you're getting these access, you can make better decisions. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I guess we should bring in experts to talk about. I'm sure there's other examples of other things that are going on in Durham or other cities that, but I just wanted to bring this up today.
Transportation's important. It's 17%. I mean, it's a huge percentage of GDP is in transportation. So to streamline it in the United States certainly would be a lot better, because we waste a lot of money on transportation in this country. It's just absolutely appalling.
What would be the and I don't know this, like I said, I'm not that familiar with the program there in Morrisville, but what would be the price point? Because Nick just made the parallel to Uber, and I can tell you that the issue with Uber sometimes, and I've had friends that have driven for it, is that it's not the cheapest method to get around either. Because like I said, I think just a quick trip downtown, which is not that far of a ride and everything, if you can't make the free bus, and the bus is free, but if you can't make the free bus and because of convenience and need, you need to get there quickly, it might run you somewhere in the neighborhood, if I want to say $30, $35. So like I said, sometimes it's a matter of convenience. So I'm asking you the price point.
Yeah, what is the price
point is for
the shuttle?
It's free. It's free. See,
we had to
it's
pay.
Not free. The taxpayer is paying for it.
Yeah.
I like the taxpayers.
Well, we got some funding. We had to put some of our own money in partnership with Go Triangle. I have to go get the figures, but it was some investment required. So the tax dollars of the budget are being used, but it is a free service.
It's a good use for tax dollars.
It's a good use for tax dollars. And eventually we're looking at incorporating, artificial intelligence and things like that, so you can get better predictive analytics of the kinds of people that might be wanting to use it. But, I didn't...
Basically, so if I'm understanding it, it's basically like access, and access is what is used here in Durham, but access is more for people that are disabled in one form or fashion. It's not available to just the plain citizens. And I know that access is also there in Wake County and in, I want to say Orange and some of the other nearby counties, but access is primarily for people that are disabled in one form or fashion, and therefore it's not just as open to the citizenship, whereas what you're describing is open to the general citizenship, because you're talking about people going to like a bar and a restaurant with their family. So it sounds like it's more open. And I do agree with something that Shaquille said, which is that it is definitely some taxpayer cost as well.
But you know, if there's a community benefit, then I don't have an issue with the community paying for that through taxes. I want to say just I think to the core of Steve's question. Look, smart cities I think is a great idea, and you know, obviously I have some reservations about solar panels, but that's not because I'm against the environment. It's just I don't think the solar panels deliver the desired outcome on a net environmental cost basis. But leaving that aside, I think it's good for government to look at doing those things. One thing that I will say, when I was in the United States, in North Carolina, I didn't spend much time in Wake, but I did certainly spend a lot of time in Mecklenburg. I met a number of mayors, Scott Neisler, for example, the mayor of Kings Mountain, who introduced me to many of the council staff there. I've met with a whole heap of different people, but I wasn't actually looking to do business in North Carolina. I was looking to do something in Georgia. And when I got to Georgia, I found that everybody from the local level to all the way up to the state government was basically saying to me, what would you guys be looking for as an international group to make us attractive enough for you to invest with us? And Georgia had some very, very compelling ideas and compelling offers to encourage us to invest there. And COVID, unfortunately, got in the way of that. But that's what I think government should be doing, and not just for international investors, but for local investors. So if you have a really good idea and it's something that you want to do that's going to benefit the community, what I would personally like to see in the United States and around the world is for governments to say, okay, what's stopping you? Are there regulations in the way? Are there complicated laws in the way? Let us assist you to navigate that. I don't think it's a good idea for government to try and do it themselves, because private enterprise does it better. So I think that they should work with private enterprise, but they always be careful. They always have to be careful of not helping one private organization in a way that gives them a preference or gives them an advantage over other potential competitors. As long as you get that balance right.
And we didn't talk about
I think it worked.
And we didn't talk about public-private partnerships, but that's what the idea, this whole idea of a smart campus and try before you buy. And that's one advantage we have in Morrisville is we are 10% of all public companies are headquartered in our town, from Lenovo to Cisco to the major tech companies and pharma companies as well. And the bottom line is that we could go to them and say, look, is there a grant that we can work on with you together? Is there a technology you have that you can test, right? And of course, like Shaquille says, that's always the chicken and the egg. You don't want to give them an unfair treatment, and the laws would require you to have a bid and a formal procurement process. But this whole idea of public-private partnerships, which I think are very intriguing in terms of how you can help the government do more at a time when they're having to do more with less, right? Rather than what's happening now where we're pumping billions and billions of dollars into the economy, right? And even as a Democrat, I'm concerned that, you look at these numbers, and we've talked about this on the show, we're looking at billions and billions and billions of dollars. How quickly is dirt going to move? When am I going to see a new road? When am I going to see a new bridge, right? That's my concern.
So I think one of the differences with how Democrats and Republicans, as a general rule, try to deal with this is that Democrats are very keen to give grants and give subsidies and things like that to private organizations in order to get them to deliver a service in that area. Republicans say, well, we're free market capitalists, so we're going to step aside and you do what you want to do. But neither of them ever say, look, the process of working through laws and regulations can be quite complex. How about we assist you with it? And I think that would actually deliver a better result than trying to give subsidies or grants. I think it would be better for government to say, what are the issues? What's holding you back? How can we help you? Should we change the law? Should we change the regulations? Something the government's very reluctant to do on both sides of the aisle. Or should we do something to make it easier for you to do what you want to do? And is there a benefit to the community if we allow you to do that?
Hey, Shaquille, I had a quick question for you, and it's actually an incentive program, but it has nothing to do, this will surprise you, with race or class or anything of that nature. But it is an industry that I love dearly and that I am very much a supporter of here in North Carolina, an industry that used to do quite well here in this area and has fallen down recently, partially to Georgia and partially to other parts, that being the film industry. And the film industry has recently decided that they're going to put in some financial incentives to bring productions here to North Carolina. And they've created something called the North Carolina Film and Entertainment Grant, which is a program run by our state's film office, which is part of the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So I was just wondering if it's to try to build an industry that might have fallen on hard times, what your thoughts are about those kind of incentives, because this is an incentive program to address an issue that has been one of our industries that did well historically. I think at one time we were ranked either number 3 or number 4, depending on who you were listening to, behind New York and California, and then Georgia and us were oftentimes neck and neck, and then we fell off to other places like Louisiana and other places like that. But this is going to give a rebate and give other kind of benefits in order to bring productions here back in to North Carolina and hopefully get it back to the kind of status that we used to have. And by the way, Nick, you'll be glad to know one of the things that they were going to add was streaming services. So they're trying to get money into folks that want to do streaming as well. So we might be able to get some of this money also, as I thought about that and everything, because this is a new grant and I don't know whether it's something that we want to go for, but they did say streaming was included.
Hey,
so to answer your question, one of the multiple things that we were looking at when I was there on my last trip was media and entertainment, and we were, and this is the reason why I was more focused on Georgia than North Carolina, because I thought that Georgia was more aggressively looking at expanding in that. Look, a subsidy or a grant in order to attract businesses in a particular industry to your state, I think is reasonable. But as I said, I think that you wanted to be able to try and balance balance competing interests and make sure that everybody has a chance. So you want to be as friendly to all businesses. You don't want to be just friendly to one. You want to be friendly to all businesses in order to encourage both investment and continued growth in particular industries. And just quickly, Mark, when you talk about, I know you said this wasn't about race, but whenever there's a conversation about race, and I just want to clarify this, I know I said to you off air a few days ago, I'm not against helping minority communities. I've never been against that. What I always say is I want to be able to help them in a way that doesn't hurt another group, whether it be white people or whoever it is. And so sometimes proposed government programs, I feel, won't actually deliver the solution. It'll help some people in the minority, but not all of them. And that's what I'm about. I'd like the thing to be fair and reasonable. So I'm not against these programs as per se, but I will speak up when I think that a program is not going to deliver what people hope it will deliver.
Yeah, Mark, here's why I look at the film industry. Okay, first of all, it's really expensive to get in order to produce a film. Like I said, the Marvel budgets run about $1 million a minute. Some of them run less, et cetera, but figure it's 50,000 minutes. It's really expensive. But here's what's going on if you watch real carefully how they're being financed. Yesterday, I watched a film that was filmed in Warsaw, Poland. It's like an advertisement for the city. In other words, what they're doing. And then I saw another film. These are all on Netflix, which was all filmed in Edinburgh, Scotland. It was a advertisement for the city. So what they're doing is they're using these films as backdrops for cities to bring people to their city. For example, Downton Abbey, which is Highclere Castle in England. We visited it because it was on Downton Abbey all the time. And they had streams of people coming in to do that. So the way to make it work, besides Georgia, is correct. They use tax credits, and they actually sold tax credits, believe it or not, in Georgia to finance the film industry, but also to do a film that highlights the city, okay, and the background of the city, because really it's a PR campaign to bring visitors to the city. Now we go to Durham, okay. What is it that Durham has that you can say, other than the Durham Bulls, which it was their own form of advertisement? It's the baseball team, believe it or not. They were great on the
No,
film.
no, but I don't think.
What do you do?
I don't think that's true, Nick, because I've travelled all over the world, and years ago I travelled on the Via Rail through the Rocky Mountains from Toronto through to Vancouver in Canada, and we stopped off at many places, and you find it fascinating. We went on a tour of Winnipeg. Sorry, Canadians.
Were you filming?
No, it was just
Okay.
as a tourist, right?
Right.
And we went on tour, and the locals were telling us all about their place, and it was fascinating. You travel a lot. It's fascinating to learn different things about different places. I learned a lot about Charlotte in my time there, and as I said, I supported the Sloan School and being moved to the Charlotte Museum of History. I think that every town, every city, every community has a story. And this is probably a more abstract example, but Squid Games, and I'm not going to give any spoiler alerts to it, there has been some criticism within Korea of it depicting Korea in a poor way, and especially relations between North Korea and South Korea. But there's been a massive uptick in interest in Korea and people wanting to travel to South Korea, that sort of stuff, because of that show. So, I think that when you present an area, people are going to be interested. People are going to want to go and see it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
in other words, your show is an advertisement. The Queen's Gambit really pushed chess out front and center. In other words, all of a sudden, all these people are playing chess, or they're on the internet playing chess. Before Queen's Gambit, it was like, they wants to do that. And so what happens is that the movies we're filming in general can actually be a demographic shift if you do it correctly. So when Durham is looking to bring films in, why would you want to do it? Unless the thing is they're going to highlight the city and the history of the city, and there's got to be a story, as they told me on PBS. You got to tell a story. What's the big compelling story? And I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm sure there's stories.
There are tons of stories that exist in Durham. Everything from the founding of North Carolina Central University to Stagville to Phil Freelon, who was one of the lead architects for the African American Museum there in DC, even though he was from here. We can even also go to his son, who is a leading hip hop artist. You can go to Ninth Wonder. Branford Marcellus lives here in Durham and has made Durham part of his history as well. And I could go on and on. There are tons of stories that exist within the Durham framework. And there have been some movies made about Durham that even highlighted some of the bad elements of Durham. I remember knowing some of the filmmakers that did a film called Welcome to Durham, which was actually highlighting some of the gang life that exists in Durham as well. So like I said, there are some stories that are positive. There are also some negative stories that exist within Durham as well. I don't know that I always agree that it is strictly a PR pitch or a tourist pitch or things along those lines. And sometimes it's even fictional stories. I remember definitely liking the TV series Twin Peaks with the moose in it and everything. That might have been a pitch for part of Alaska, and I think it was set in either Anchorage or Fairbanks, but it was also kind of a play on things along those lines and along the lines of a farce of that community and everything. I don't know that it put the community in the greatest light and everything. And the same with I want to go back in time, WKRP in Cincinnati, another
WKRP
I love dearly, but it had Cincinnati, but it was focused on the radio station and a lot of the people that were in that space and things along those lines. The cost you gave is very correct for a big Hollywood movie and things along those lines. Independents, I have friends that make some independents, and some of them can be made relatively inexpensively. Now, if you're talking about an independent that's going to hit the TV circuit and things of that nature, yes, you are still talking in the millions of dollars and things of that nature. But there's some independents that have done quite well and are done on a small basis. And sometimes they touched on issues that I might not have even thought about, but the people that made it thought it would be an interesting topic. I know one friend of mine did a whole film around funeral homes and things along those natures. But
we could turn this into a film.
The Big Sheet could definitely be turned into a film.
I was going through that. I was going, gosh, that would be a film that people would watch, because, like I said, I did a survey. 27% think he should be reelected and run, and 8% said Joe Biden. And so the thing is, but who would finance it? Oh, wait, the Democratic National Convention.
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Because, that Indian guy, I forget his name, who's a conservative, and he said he made a couple of films. One was Hillary's America and Obama's America.
Michael Moore?
No, the Indian guy, D'Souza, somebody D'Souza. So, and that wasn't funded by the Republicans. But look, I think it's a lot of, when it comes to films, when it comes to TV shows and stuff, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that gets done, editing and processing of film and all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't have to be all done in California. A lot of it's not anyway. And there's a lot of talent in other states. So,
don't tell Henry Morales that. He said all the talent's in Hollywood.
Well, I don't agree with that when he said it. Him and I will have some further conversations.
It's all within the LA block. Outside of LA, there's no talent. But I think
and he's right.
I think they got
a lot of talent in LA. There's a lot of talent in LA, and as I said, I've produced some of his movies, but and I've been, he's been graciously enough listed on the IMDb database. But look, yes, there's a lot of talent there, but sometimes you find talent outside of the core area where everybody is, and things can be a bit cheaper, and you can actually tap into talent that would otherwise go unrecognized. X Factor and Australian Idol, American Idol, Australian Idol, those sorts of shows, I don't really watch them that often, but what do? They go around to different areas and they find talent that otherwise would be overlooked.
Sure. No, I agree with you. In other words, when you have a bigger demographic pool and you have 7.5 billion, there's going to be talent in that demographic pool. The thing is, I think there's a more concentrated talent in LA. But the thing is, if you spread through the whole world, then you've got a lot of talent throughout the world. But you still have to make the financials make sense.
Right. This is where I agree with Mark, but in a different way. So there's a lot of talent within minority communities, but oftentimes that talent doesn't get the chance in the first place to be looked at, so they don't get the chance to then go on. And they might be not economically, it's not economically viable for them to travel to LA and pursue their dreams.
Sure.
So if you're going to try to promote people so they get noticed, great. As I said, my only concern is we don't promote them in a way which says you're going to get it because of the color of your skin and we're going to hold somebody else back. But as long as we're not hurting anybody else, absolutely we should promote these things. Yeah. And as I said, there's a lot of talent out there that is unrecognized. And I would say that within the hedge fund world and finance world, I got very lucky because people in Switzerland said, who were introduced to me by other people who said, this guy's really talented. Nobody's going to go from Perth to Zurich. That doesn't happen. But it was because a few people recognized my talents and said, here's a diamond in the rough. Let me introduce you to him. Let's fly him to Switzerland and there you go. So I do think that there's a lot to be said for looking for talent in places where you may not ordinarily look, because you often will find stuff that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Shaquille, unfortunately, the pandemic stopped one of the greatest events that I was involved with and things of that nature. And I'm not just saying because I was involved with it because it wasn't my creation, but it was a good friend of mine, Captain Newborn, who had a relationship with the Apollo, which is a historical African-American center in New York that has definitely launched many stars, including Stevie Wonder and a number of others. But he had a relationship that basically gave us carte blanche. And we did a show called The Road to the Apollo that lasted for roughly 4 or 5 years. And literally we went throughout the state of North Carolina. I think he also had some project where he would go to other states or contracted it out to other states. But here in this area, we went from everywhere from Fayetteville to Rocky Mount to a number of other cities, including the city that he was from, Kinston. And you were right. We found a lot of local talent and some tremendous talent. I think we had something like a 95% success rate, meaning that the people that we sent up actually got, one, they had carte blanche, which means that they got to skip the line. Anybody that knows anything about those talent competitions knows that those lines can last forever and a day. But we got to skip the line, go to the front of the line, and then do the auditions. And like I said, most of the people we sent up, because we weren't going to send up garbage, would actually managed to get their shot on the stage. Some did better than others. I don't know that we had anybody that won, but we did have one young gentleman from Raleigh that actually got onto a Tyler Perry show and may still be on that show. Yeah. As far as I know, I need to check on that and see if he's still on that show.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, and I'm sorry I had to leave for a few minutes, but I am just ready. the Zoom thing, I'm getting so zoomed out still. Now that we're going with Omicron, we're starting to see less in-person events, and I get, you get 4 or 5 in a day, and you just don't feel like going because there wasn't this, the event we always have in Mooresville is the employee appreciation event where they serve so much food, turkey, ham. It's usually around Thanksgiving, and then cranberries, mashed potato, all kinds of pies. So you eat and you're full for 3 days, but then you thank the employees that have been there a long time. Well, this year we thought they were doing it in person. They did it Zoom, virtual.
Virtual Zoom. How do you eat on Zoom?
You can't. So you just sit there, and you know what? I missed it.
Oh,
Because I had done 4 Zoom calls in a row after this show. I do work Zoom calls, and I got so tired. I went for a walk with my wife in the Greenway.
Yeah.
And then I forgot that I had a Zoom event.
So Steve, if there's anybody who's sympathetic to that, it's definitely me, because Australia, obviously, we've had some pretty severe lockdowns, and there have been days when I've been on Zoom conferences for 12, 13, 14 hours or more. So I obviously have a lot of deals in front of me at various times. But I will also say, let's thank our lucky stars that technology has provided us with what it has, because if we were going through this pandemic 100 years ago, hell, 20 years ago, we wouldn't even be able to have these sort of face-to-face communications. The 4 of us have become relatively close, especially with our backstage conversations, but we wouldn't be able to do that even 20 years ago. So we're living in a great time, and yeah, you might feel zoomed out, but thank goodness that you are in a position where you can feel zoomed out, because
I create more
do that.
Yeah, but Shaquille, it's interesting he said that, because like I said, when I mentioned the talent showcase and everything, we decided, and it was a joint effort, those of us that were involved, not to make it a virtual event, because we just felt that it wasn't going to have that same kind of appeal. We would wait out the pandemic and hopefully go back to doing it live at some point or another. Maybe that'll be 2022. And even in that sense, I know that on one of the boards that I sit on, the Carolina Theater, we did a virtual event, and it was a virtual event in terms of even a virtual fundraiser. And we decided that this year, if we do a fundraiser, it's not going to be like that hybrid mix, because that what you wind up doing is you wind up doing 2 productions. You're doing your hybrid version or your virtual version, and you're doing their live version. So what the people have to say is it's going to be one or the other.
But let's recognize, what technology does give for us.
No,
so many of us have jumped on Zoom to wish each other a happy birthday. Mine's coming up next week. My mother won't be able to be here because of the border closures in Australia. So she's going to jump on Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or something like that and have a chat with me. Various things like that. The old man lives in Perth. I'm not going to be likely to see him, obviously, for the same reasons. So technology is able to deliver us something that we wouldn't have been able to do 20 years ago. There's nothing like face-to-face, in-person meetings, but it's nice to be able to communicate in a way that we weren't able to do before.
By the way, just really quickly, Denisha DeSouza is the person that you were trying to remember. So you did remember the name, but it was Denisha DeSouza.
Coco flew over the Cuckoo Puffs on that one. He's a bit crazy, isn't he?
Why? Because the Democrats went after him? No, come on, stop it.
He's actually a great author, but he got in trouble there for a couple things. I don't know what that was about, but anyway.
I think it was because he
is he going to be on our show?
Well, no, he my understanding, it's been a while since I looked at it. I think that he wanted to donate more money than the donation cap, and so he actually asked a friend of his to donate for him on his behalf, and he got caught doing that. But look. I think, he knew what he was doing, I think, right? But it would be like, Steve, it'd be like you and me. Like, I'd love to donate to your campaign because I think that you're a real asset to the United States. And more importantly, I like you, right? But I can't donate because I'm not an American and I'm not allowed to contribute to US political campaigns, for the same reason that when I collect political memorabilia, I can't actually buy that stuff from the Democrats or from the Republicans. I have to actually buy that from shops or have other people buy it for me, that sort of stuff. I can't actually buy it because I'm a foreigner. And look, hey, that's fair enough. But sometimes I think people get caught up in the complexities of the law and they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. And look, they'll be the same. If you guys wanted to donate to the Liberal Party or to the Labor Party in Australia because you happen to like a candidate, the candidate's a friend of yours that you knew for 30 years, and you're not allowed to do that. Ethically, should you be able to? Should you not be able to? Who knows? But I think a lot of times people get caught up in laws where they're not intending to do something particularly bad. And I don't think that what Dinesh D'Souza did was particularly bad. I think it was just a technical breach.
Hey, Nick, I just had a brilliant idea.
Good. We need brilliant ideas. We haven't
I just had a brilliant idea
on the show in a long time. So go on.
Yeah. How about this brilliant idea? D'Souza versus David Kay in a debate. I think this could be a great debate. Yeah. One very pro-Trump, the other very anti-Trump.
Steve Rao versus Dinesh. I want him. You bring Dinesh, and we're going to have a battle of India.
I'm going to defend.
Give me the guy's name. I'll call him. What's his name?
Dinesh, you're mine.
I'm going to defend David Kay Johnson here because I don't actually think, and I don't want to put words in David Kay's mouth, I don't think that David Kay has ever or often criticizes Trump for his policy's sake. He might disagree with some of his policies, but I think that David Kay has lost respect for Donald Trump over the years. What's very interesting about David Kay Johnson, as opposed to many other people that criticize Donald Trump, is that David Kay Johnson has been talking about Donald Trump for 30 years. Right. And Donald Trump is quoted on the back page of that book as saying David Kay is a weird guy. So, and as he should be. David Kay is an investigative journalist. He's worked for the New York Times. He's won a Pulitzer Prize. I very much respect the guy. I enjoy talking to him. David Kay and I disagree on certain things, but I don't think that disagreeing on a political position is the basis of animosity. I think that David Kay has a poor opinion of Donald Trump, but I don't think if he was going to debate Dinesh D'Souza would be more based on policies, not based on Donald Trump as a person. Okay. I think David Kay is talking about Donald Trump more as a person.
Who's this guy D'Souza? What's his name? Denise D'Souza?
We'll talk about it off air.
I'm going to call him right now. What's his name? I mean,
let's talk about it off air. We got 9 minutes left.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We do.
So real quickly, before we close out with
afterwards,
before we close out,
I'm going to call the head of Planned Parenthood also.
So
for one of our shows.
One of Mayor De Blasio's last acts was to enforce a mask mandate across the entire town, or vaccine mandate, I think, for all of New York. So Eric Adams is about to take over. Yeah. Durham just swore in a new mayor. We've got.
I do wish her very well, Mark. I really do. I genuinely mean that. I wish her well, and I will pray for her success and for the success of that community.
I want her to go on our show.
Regardless of whether I disagree with some policies. No, but regardless of whether I disagree with some policies. A good, righteous person should always pray for their leaders, even if they don't agree with everything the leaders do.
No, agreed on that.
Yeah,
and I think we'll do a good job.
Okay, we're going to talk about World War III, or we can put it on hold.
No, I was going to close out with that, but
okay. Well, I mean, the thing is, I think it's kind of important. While you're discussing all this wonderful stuff, my golf game could be interrupted by some nuclear bomb in my backyard. That I do not appreciate, Steve. Okay.
Well, I think this is a good segue into my monologue. But to me, what I think this is all about, I have a theory. I'm going to work on it's about nationalism, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that it is very scary that we are now headed back to an environment where we grew up with the Cold War, right? Russia, the Iron Curtain, United States of America. I don't know if you remember 1980 when the USA played Russia in the hockey big thing, right?
I don't remember, but I wasn't born then. Thank you very much.
I remember Bobby Fischer, Boris Spassky.
Right. 1972. And the day after, where they talked about that movie about what would happen after nuclear aftermath, and then there was Perestroika, Gorbachev, the separation of the states from the Soviet Union, and now we've got Putin, right? Who is just Vladimir Putin, and it is quite scary of the escalation of troops and what would happen in Ukraine. And when you talk about World War III, President Biden is saying that they will cut Russia off of international aid if there is an invasion, right? Is this going to be like the Bay of Pigs crisis or Cuban Missile Crisis, where it's going to be checks and balances and diplomacy at the highest levels of government? But at the end of the day, I think it's just about nationalism, and I think that these countries, we're seeing also in China, they want the people of Russia to be loyal to Russia, because that is their way they can keep their country together. And
or is there going to be a limited war? I mean, the thing is, I mean, this is something that's real today. In other words,
or a cyber war, or a cyber war.
Well, but not a nuclear war, but like what went on Syria, a limited war, where in other words, all of a sudden the Russians came in like they did in Crimea. They took over Crimea. Nobody did anything. Now Ukraine, I don't know if Ukraine's going to do anything. Do they have an army? Because if you saw what happened to Afghanistan, purportedly they had 400,000 Afghanistan people, and they didn't do anything. Just said, "Hey, come on, Taliban, take everything over." So the real question is, we know what Putin has. He's got right now, at least we think we know, 90,000 people lined up at the borders. Okay. In old World War II, they called it mobilization. You've got 90,000 people, Lord knows how many tanks. Ukraine, what do they have? Do they have any?
Apparently, because I just looked it up, the armed forces of Ukraine has apparently 6,970,000 and 35 people between the ages of 16 and somewhere in the 40s and everything, and they've got available for military service 11,149,000.
How many tanks?
No, that might be population.
How many tanks
services wouldn't be that big. But look, let me just say, Steve, look, it's not unreasonable for China and for the leaders of China to want Chinese people to be loyal and proud to be Chinese. It's not unreasonable for Russia to want Russian people to be loyal and proud to be Russian. And, of course, they're going to act in their self-interest. The West has to act in its self-interest as well and be proud of our history and what we've achieved. I think especially if it's going to be a direct superpower versus superpower issue, I'd like to think that it will never go nuclear again. But, yes, it needs to be diplomatic. And yes, it also has to be recognition of various things. And to talk about Russia, we've had them under international sanctions for such a long time. That's not going to make the Russian people say, "Oh, wow, we should change and conform with the West." It's going to make the Russian people resent the West. So, we have to be able to work. It's like politics. You've got to be able to work across the aisles. You've got to be able to work with different countries and respect that they have different values, different cultures, different things. If we can't do that, it's our fault. Yeah. That's why I say I'm no apologist for Russia. I'm no apologist for China. Yeah. But, when people talk about China making inroads around the world, that's what they should be doing. They're acting in their self-interest. They're increasing trade. This is what we should be doing, not because we want to attack China, but because we also want to be competitive with China. And the more competitive we are, the better it is for us and the better it is for China.
Shaquille, and I want to tie the two things we talked about together really quickly.
That one.
Yeah, I want to tie the two things that we talked about together because I actually was on a friend's broadcast as well not that long ago, and it came up in the conversation. This whole concept of smart cities and the whole concept of what's going on in the world with nationalism and regionalism and things along those lines. Is there any fear that everybody on this panel has, because I brought it up with some friends of mine on their panel discussion, that we could develop into a series of silos? I know that there's a lot of people that talk about the metaverse, and it could be just all of us kind of in our individual silos, in our individual communities, and that we lose kind of this global world that we all love and that we all are always talking about if we're all in this kind of isolated environment. I've talked about what's happened there in Cary, at least my perception of it, with some of the Indian communities when they've come in. But I was wondering, could we get into this environment where everybody is in their own individual silos and there's not as much interconnection as we have had in the past? Because that's one of my great fears is we could.
So we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly give you my 10 seconds on it. Then we'll go Nick and Steve. Look. If the capitalists, and especially the crony capitalists, have their way and the globalists have their way, yes, that's a very real possibility. And it would be a real shame. I think that we're interconnected today. It's a fantastic thing, but you want to be able to show the benefit for everybody. You don't want to be having, unfettered capitalism, unrestrained capitalism without any regulations at all in a way that hurts particular communities, helps others, and then people resent it, and then they try to have their smaller communities to help themselves. And this really goes back to, if you look at America's founding between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and what those debates were, it was very, very similar. You need to, with all things, you need to be able to find a balance. but between competing interests.
See what I think, Steve, Mark, when I was in Italy, they said you're a Florentine, you're a Venetian, you're a Roman, until soccer comes to play. Then you're all Italians. I think in America, you're Democrats, you're Republicans, until Putin comes to play. When Putin comes to play, we're all Americans. It's a whole different cat. And one thing that we do good, and we've done good historically, is war. There's something weird about the American public. We're just really good at wars. So I don't know what Vlad thinks.
I think I'll respond to that tomorrow in the interest of time. But I don't think that you're good at wars, but it's not because America is a war-hungry country.
Here's my final take. Not really my final jab, but at the end of the day, folks, we've had a wonderful show. I think that we know today that I do not believe that we are headed towards a Cold War with Russia, similar to what we were in the 80s, 90s, and even 70s and before that. I think that this recent attack by Putin against the West might very well be him trying to detract the attention of his own citizens from the many problems that plague their nation. Right. Russia is not even close to the economic power of the United States of America, which is really being threatened by China. So up until now, the sole superpower after 1991, when we became the United States of America without needing the Soviet Union, and then you had Boris Yeltsin who handpicked Putin, but Russia's economic might is no longer what it once was. Now, also militarily maybe strong around that part of the world, but still, I don't think they're the same Russia, the same Soviet bloc power that they once were. But this guy is definitely intended on bringing down the West. Whether he does it through allying with China or others, I don't know. The reasons for it, though, we'll never know. But it is a challenging time for United States foreign policy. But China, make no mistake, that's the real threat. So we don't want to take our eye off the ball, because I do believe China has the economic might. They have the military might, right? Their infrastructure, their technology. Soon they're going to be taking the lead in AI and also the space race. We're going to talk about that on World Edition next week. But very soon, by the time of the decade is over, they're predicting that China will have more satellites in space than the United States of America. That is very scary in terms of the advantage that could give them for space wars, missile capability, all of these things, right? So this could detract the U.S. from what we need to focus on, the real enemy, China.
No, hang on, Steve. So I have to jump in there. A couple of things. One, China's not the enemy. They're doing what they should be doing. Right. The United States and its allies are falling behind. That's the failure of the West. And as for Russia, I don't think that Putin wants to destroy the West. He just wants to make a stronger, better Russia, as he should be. That's his role. So I don't think that China or Russia are trying to destroy the West, but they want to improve their own condition. And that's exactly what their leaders should be doing.
Right. Yeah. Well, folks, we're out of time. I want to thank you all for being with World Edition. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be very brief on Friday from PBS, Carolina, because I have to go to the Smart Cities Conference. I'll be able to open up and then I head down to Raleigh. But I will be from the station live on PBS. And hopefully we'll hear back from the Smart Cities folks. If not, we'll do it next week. But thank you for being with us, folks. Be safe. Happy holidays. And make your cities smart. And thank you so much.